Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you some basics of working with the gradients, and I'll show you the tools, and then I'll show you some different ways that Inkscape presents gradients to you so that you can understand how it works, and then that'll allow you to develop your workflow and then be able to work with gradients the way that is most comfortable for you. I have Inkscape open here. I have no panels open, but I like working with a couple of specific panels. And to open those, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can come up here to the object menu and open some of them in here. Or if you're, depending on what you're trying to open, it'll be in one of these menus. The two that I'm going to open are the layers and objects panel and the fill and stroke panel. And you see the shortcut keys. So this is one way. You can click them here, or you can just hit the Shift Control L and that'll open the layers one, or you can hit Shift Control F and that'll open that one. You can also come down here and select it from this drop down, which is basically an extension of this command bar. And if you open this and then hit this one, that's the layers and objects. So that's the first one I like to have open when I'm working, because it allows me to see the structure of whatever I'm working on. Now, it's not going to play a big part in this video because we're only going to be working with one shape. But usually if you're building something that has multiple shapes, you want to see what shapes you have. So I like working with this one open because it helps me understand structurally what I'm looking at over here, which is actually stacked. And it can be hard for you to understand what's on top of what. But if you have this open, you can see it very clearly as you add things. Now, the other one that I like, and the one we're going to focus on in this video, is the fill and stroke panel. And you can open it the same ways that I've already showed you. There's three different ways. You can use this menu, you can use the shortcut key, or you can use this. This is the icon for it right here. But the fourth way that you can open it is if you have a panel open, you can click here and just open it out of this list. So there's multiple ways that you can get these panels open. And you don't have to have these open when you're working. It just, for me, it's going to help me explain what we're talking about here, which is the gradients. It's also going to help me show you different ways that you can add gradients, and it's also going to be beneficial in explaining how the gradients work. So I'm going to have this open, and this one I might refer to occasionally, just to, probably not going to need it in this video, but it's just a habit. So let's get to the gradients. In order to work with a gradient, you need to have something on your canvas that you can put a gradient on. So I'm just going to use a rectangle, and you see that I have green loaded as the color. That's the color that I had open last. See it up here? The fill is set to green, and it shows me that as soon as I select the rectangle tool. If you have a tool that can have color applied, the selection tool doesn't have that. So this selector, you don't have this color definition up here because you don't use colors with a selector, but with a rectangle you do. So as soon as you switch to that tool, you get this color definition area right up here, and it's telling me that I have green set for the fill, and I have nothing set for the stroke. The stroke is unset. So when I draw this, and you can see my cursor's telling me you have a green fill on your rectangle. Now if I want to change that before I draw it out, I can do that real easy just by clicking the color here, and you'll see that it changes up there. But let's draw out a red rectangle, and we're just going to let off, and now we have a rectangle. Now notice what happened in my fill and stroke panel. I now have a color definition loaded in here, and that's because I had a fill set to solid red. And if you look, you have, because it's in HSL mode, and I won't get into all these different color modes here, Yours is probably in HSL. It might be in RGB depending on what you used last. You can change it. HSL, it doesn't matter. It just is different ways to define the same colors. So if I have it in HSL and the values are 0, 100, 50, 100, if I switch it to RGB, this is probably going to turn into RGB 100 or 255, and then it's going to have G, which is going to be 0, and B, which is going to be 0, and it's going to have an alpha of 255 or 100 depending on how it's expressed. So you can see the red channel is at 255 and the green is at 0, the blue is at 0, so that's full red in RGB. The idea here is it's not really a different color, it's just a different way to communicate color. So it doesn't matter which one you're working in, you're still going to be able to see what we're talking about. I'm going to use HSL because that's probably what yours is in right now. You also have this, you can trip this. It's like a switch, turn it on, turn it off. If you turn it on, it shows you the color wheel, and you can define your colors by picking them. You can move this color wheel around, and then I'm not going to get into that right now either. But if you prefer to work with the color wheel and you like using it, you can use it. I'm just going to show you basically the color definitions in the sliders. And HSL lets you set the hue, the saturation, the lightness, and the alpha for HSL with alpha. So that's what this stands for, hue, saturation, and lightness. So the hue is a red hue, which is at 0. Saturation is at 100, full, 100% saturation. As much of that hue as you can put in it is in it. And then lightness, it's set to 50, which is right in the middle. And if you move this up or down, you either get a dark color of that hue or you get a light color of that hue. So we'll leave it right at 50 because that's the full red. So that's the color that we have right now. But here's the deal. We're working with a fill and we want to work with a gradient. So how do we get a gradient on this? There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can select the object and hit the gradient tool like that, and then double click on it like that, and that puts a gradient on there. Or you can, with this selected, you can come up here and go into your fill and stroke panel, and you can just select this, which is a linear gradient. Now notice there's different gradients. There's a radial gradient, there's a mesh gradient, and then there's some other options in here that you can fill this shape with. I'm just going to stick with just these two for this video, right? So we're going to do a linear gradient, and when I click this button, it's going to basically put the gradient, it's going to put a gradient on this just like it did a minute ago when I selected the tool and double clicked. And what it's doing is it's going from full whatever color you had selected to that same color but with full transparency on it. So it looks like it's going from red to white, but not really. That's just because we have a white background behind this. If I dropped in another shape behind this that was black, you would see black on this end instead of white, because it's not really a color. Well, it is a color, it's red, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's red, but it's got full transparency on it. So I'm going to back up and show you the other way to put that gradient on there. And with the rectangle selected, you can also come up here and just click this linear gradient button, and it does the same thing. Now you'll notice you don't have the line on here. If you want to work with that line after you've applied this gradient, you just come over here and select the gradient tool, and that will show you the endpoints of the gradients. Now this endpoint here is represented up here in this slider or this bar with this left color stop, and you can move that thing around, and see what happens. See how that diamond's moving off of the end point? That's an offset. So I'm putting an offset on there, and I'm saying, hey, everything before this offset point, I want it to be filled with the same color. So this is full red behind it, and then it starts going from full red to completely transparent at this point. So that is what's called an offset. Now you can fine tune that offset right here underneath this bar by clicking on this to set it by, if you just want to fine tune it. Let's say I wanted it at 25% instead of in the middle. I could do that. This other color stop is telling you that, hey, the red color is set on this, but there's a transparency as well. That's why the bottom of it is transparent. And you'll notice that there's even another way that you can see the color, the gradient representation with these dots here. So this one is just like clicking this dot. If you click it, it gets highlighted and it selects that one. And if you click this one, notice what happens. It selects this color stop up here. It also selects this endpoint down here. So you can select a color stop all these different ways. You can either do it on the canvas, you can do it on the slider bar, or you can do it on the stop list here. You can choose just depends on how you want to work. If you like working directly on canvas, you can just click these dots and it selects it. And then if you want to change the color of this, you can do that. Let's say I wanted to make this a darker red, and I'm just going to come down here and click this. Now see, it changed the color for this color stop. Now what if I wanted it to go from that bright red to dark red? Well, I would need another color stop for that. And there's multiple ways that you can add other color stops. For example, if you're working this way, you can just point at the line. See where when I point to the line, my cursor gets that plus down and to the right from it? If I just double click there, it will put another color stop on it. So you can add it that way, or you can come up here and you can go to your stop list here, right? And you can select one of them. I'm going to choose this one because whichever one you have selected here, it's going to insert the next stop right below it. So you can select it here and then click this plus button and it will insert another stop. When you do it this way, and I didn't happen to point that out, if you do it here, when you double click, see how it adds a full red? That's a full red, but it's at 78% transparent. So if you want it to be completely opaque, you would have to change that slider. And it works the same way if you add it in here. Like if I insert one between here and here, because I'm not clicking a specific place on the canvas, it's just going to create one that's right in the middle of those two. So if I add one, see how this one now is, its transparency is set to 50. It's exactly 50% between the 2 points that were already there because I did not tell it exactly where I wanted it. So if I wanted this one, again, same idea, you have to give it opacity by changing the opacity. And then you can move its position with the slider up here. So everything that you can do directly on the canvas by clicking and moving things around, you can do inside this panel as long as you understand what all this means and what happens when you move stuff around. See how the slider on the canvas is moving that same node or that same color stop marker. It's moving it back and forth. And you can move it this way too. They're basically tied to the same underlying thing. It's just showing it to you in two different ways. Let's put this at 25%. And then let's insert another color stop, and we'll do this one the same way. I'm just going to hit the plus and add another stop in here. And I want this one to be at 75. And I'm going to change these colors. I'm going to make this, let's make that full, and we'll make this fully transparent. And then what I'll do is I'll change the colors of these just by selecting the stop that I want to change the color on, and I'm just going to move this hue. I'm going to leave everything the same. I'm just going to switch the hue from that red to a yellow because it flows nicely. Red to yellow basically creates an orange shade in between. And then if you go down here to the next one, and I'll make that one, we're going from yellow to, let's go to green because they naturally blend. That's how they are on the spectrum. It's easy to go from yellow to green because it transitions nicely. And then we'll make this one the same color of green, which, let's see, that is a hue of 125. So that's the one that I want on here. I want 125 for the hue. And now it goes nicer. It's a much more even gradient going from green to green with transparency. You get the idea here. And actually, let's make this last one, let's make it that blue color just to balance out this gradient. I'm doing this for a very specific reason because I want multiple colors on here for the next thing I'm going to show you. So we've got this set up. We're going from red to yellow to green to blue. And now in your panel up here you've got well, first of all, let me show you here. When you're working on the canvas, you can change the way this gradient falls. So I can move these endpoints around just by dragging them, and I can make that gradient go from the upper left hand corner to the bottom right hand corner. I can also tighten it up and make it a narrow band like that, or I can spread it out. And you'll see that what I've just done is I've just flipped it opposite what it was before by just rotating it, switching the ends. Now there's a way that you can do that in here very easily just by clicking this button, reverse the direction, and it does basically the same thing, only it doesn't move the points like we did when we drug them. See, the square endpoint is over here still. It just reversed how these color stops went. So depending on what you're trying to do, you may either want to rotate it, or you may want to just reverse the color stop order. This reverses the color stop order. See how the endpoints are not changing? The square one's over here and the round one's over here. And as I flip this, the only thing that moves is the color stops. They get swapped. Whereas dragging it over here actually changes it leaves your color stops in the same order, but it makes the gradient go from a different direction. Now, you can also, besides reversing it with this button, you can also rotate it with this button. And you click that button and it just rotates at 90 degrees clockwise. And you have the orientation it doesn't have to be exactly 90. Remember when we drug this up here and moved this down here and went from left to right, down top to bottom? You can do the same thing by making this go to 45. Well, actually, it's more like 30. And because of the shape of the rectangle, it's actually even less than that. So, but you get the idea. You can rotate the gradient using the orientation value here just by clicking it to, this allows you to fine tune it to an exact angle. The other thing you can do, and I'll move these in so it's not quite as wide here. I'm going to, actually I want to leave this one on this end. Want that one on that end, and I want this one about there will be fine. So I'm going to flip these again. Now you have a repeat, and right now it repeats one time over the span of the shape that it's on. But if I select this and do a direct repeat, you can see what happens. Depending on how large or how small your gradient is, it will just keep repeating. So if you tighten this up, you'll create the same pattern over and over again. If you stretch it out, it just repeats fewer times. This time, in this case, just twice. You can also, instead of doing a repeat based on only the width, you can repeat reflected, which will flip. See how right here it flips. So it goes from blue to green to yellow to red to yellow to green to blue to green to yellow to red. It just keeps alternating back and forth. So that might come in handy. Instead of having to create, let's say you wanted to create something like that that repeated a bunch of times, rather than having to create like 16 color stops, you only have to create a fourth of that and then just let it repeat 4 times. So that's nice, a nice feature, because it allows you to repeat the same pattern over the course of a shape. So that's what these buttons do. You can also use stored gradients, or you can save them yourself with this button here. I'm not going to get into a whole lot about that. I might do a different video on that in the future. But just know that you can create your custom gradients and you can save them in the file that you're working on. Now, I'm not aware of a way that you can save them into libraries and then load them every time you open Inkscape to use in different projects. But if you're aware of it, if you're watching this and you know that that can be done or how to do it, leave a comment in the comments area and help the rest of us out. I haven't found a way to do it. There may be one. I just haven't found it. The way that I normally work is, if I want to use, I have a file, one Inkscape file that I have my predefined gradients loaded in. They're just on squares like this one. They're just on squares, and then I have those gradients all set up, and I open that file, and then I'll copy them out. I'll copy those shapes out of that file and put them in the file that I want them to be in. So I move the library to the file rather than load the library into a file. So, but you can do that. This keeps track of all the gradients that you have on your project. So if I wanted to call this one spectrum, right, I could do that because it kind of looks like the colors of the spectrum. So I could do that, and that helps me not only visually see it, but if they look similar, I can distinguish one from another just by the name that I give it. So that's what that little button is for. We already talked about all this stuff up here, and how this is a representation. It's the same information, just as what's in here, just represented in a different way. This is your color definition. We touched on that. I showed you how you can add stops and the offset. I showed you all of that. So the other thing that I want to show you is how this differs from a radial gradient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just to demonstrate how I work with the gradient libraries, I'm going to leave this down here off of the canvas, right? And what I'm going to do is I'll come up here and I'll create a radial gradient on a circle. So I'm going to drag out a circle. Notice it's red because that's the last color that I loaded on a tool. And I think that'll be all right. Let's put a gradient on this. Now again, we could select the gradient tool and double click it, or the way I normally do it is I just come up here and click the type of gradient that I want and it puts it on there. And then in this case, you'll see that I get the same thing. From the center, I have the full color, and then it goes to alpha of 0 as it works its way outward. And I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but these color stops in here that have the partial gradient on them, see, this is part color, part gradient. That means it's got both. It's got a color and a gradient, and you just define the amount of color right here. So if I didn't point that out before, this fourth slider is for the transparency. It's also called alpha channel or opacity. Fully opaque is 100%, fully transparent is 0, and we're talking about the alpha of the color. So that's what that is. You have these 3 points on a radial gradient, which allows you to do a couple of different things. You can make this an ellipse by just moving one of these round ones. So if you drag this down, it turns it into an ellipse or an oval, depending on what you want to call it. And if you move this one, it'll do the same thing. It just squeezes it the other direction. So I'm going to hit Control Z so that I get my full circle. And this one actually allows you to move that center point of the gradient. So let's say, and this will be a good way to use our layers. Let's make, let's just give a practical demonstration of this. But first, let's go back to this, and I want to show you what I was talking about before. I have a gradient on this, but I haven't changed the colors of it. I haven't defined its color values or its color stop structure. But I have a gradient already in this file. It's down here. It's off of the page. So if I was to export this page, this would not show up. But it is in the file. So I can put this gradient on this object just by coming up here and selecting it from my list. So now we have that same gradient, and notice the color stops are exactly where they are because it's all defined in this gradient. And that's the takeaway. The gradient is not the object, it's a different thing. It's a definition of how color moves across an object and how that color looks at each point where there's a color stop. So this kind of looks like an X-ray view of a jawbreaker, one of those giant jawbreakers that you used to eat when you were a kid. But let's say I wanted to move this central point. Let's say I wanted to move this to a specific area. You can move this around. Let's just move it up here and see what it does. It basically allows you to relocate the origin point of that color stop. So you can do all kinds of interesting things with radial gradients on circular shapes, and that's really what I wanted to demonstrate here. This would be how you would put a gradient on something that you wanted to give curvature, the appearance of curvature or depth. You could put it on it this way. Imagine you were trying to make maybe a pool ball, And let's say I go back to a regular gradient here and I remove these color stops and I just select I don't know what's, I can't remember the colors on the different ones, but let's just say that I wanted to make I think the 7 ball is the maroon one. So let's make this color stop maroon, and we'll push the alpha all the way up so that it's completely opaque. And then let's make this white. Make it fully opaque. And then let's move this up to here. Actually, what I should have done was started with yeah, I should have done that. And then I can flip this, add another color stop. We'll put it in here. And now this middle one, I want that to be white. And then I want to put another one, yet another one on this. So let's put another one on here. We'll select that and add it, and we'll make this one full. We want that to be the same hue. Hue is 0, saturation is 100. So saturation is 100, and apparently the lightness is 35. So I'm going to move the lightness down on this one to 35. And then what I'll do is I will move this color stop right up against this one. All right, put it right next to it. And that gives us a nice, and if you want to make that circle, this will be where the number goes, right? Depending on how large, this isn't to scale or anything, it's just to give you the concept. And then now I can move this up here, and then I could create another layer in here, right? If I wanted to add a new layer, I can do that just by clicking this button right here. And then on this layer I would put my text, and in this case it's just the number 7. It's an awfully big 7. It's not the right font or the right color. So we'll make it black. We'll give it a, I don't know, some other kind of font. Sans serif will work. And then we'll just resize it. And then we'll put it on there. Now, I could add even more depth by putting another layer on top of it, but you get the point. So if I wanted to add depth to this, I could just add some more color stops. Like I would put them like between here. I would add them like in between these, and maybe make this a darker color, make it go a little darker. Say I wanted it to be really dark there, and then just a little bit here, and a little bit here. And as you work your way up, you would add you're basically making it go from light to dark the further it goes down the sphere. So you get the idea. Now that clearly could use a lot of work, but I don't want to take up a bunch of your time with details that you would have to test and experiment with to make it look the way you wanted it to work. But you get the idea. You can add depth by using these gradients on round shapes if you use the radial gradient. So I think I've covered the basics of the gradients. Now some people like working with they just like working with on the canvas. Like if you have a color here and you double click this and double click that, or click that and then double click this, then you can come up here and apply your gradient if you have one stored, or you can create one and then move things around like this to get your, but I think you get the idea. This can extend off of the object too. So depending on what you want to do, that's one thing that might not be obvious. So let me do that. Let me show you something else you can do with gradients. Let's say I have two objects here, and this, you may have already worked this out in your mind just by watching this, but it's maybe something that isn't readily apparent. I'm just setting up something here that represents this idea of, and probably what I should have done was I'm going to use text, because that is a case where a lot of people might use this. I'm going to create text called line 1. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to use a font that is that's got some boldness to it. If I can find one here relatively quickly. By the way, if you want to load fonts onto your machine that don't come with your machine, I have a video on the channel that shows you how to do that. I'm going to duplicate that and move it down here, and then I'm going to change that. And now what I want to do is, let's say I wanted to create a gradient that went across both of these lines at the same time. Can you do that? Well, you can, and I normally do it a different way from this, but I'm going to try this just to see, because if it works, this will be a simpler way to do it than the way I normally do. So I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to click linear gradient and see what happened. It put the gradient on both of them. And if you go to your gradient tool, you've got two independent gradients that you can set on these. Now, the way I normally do it, and the way that I think, now you can set them on multiple items at the same time that way, but what I normally do, if I want to treat these, let's say this was one design that just had 2 lines of text. What I would do is I would take this text and I would turn it into object to path, and see how now this is not text anymore. I can't edit it. It's actually a path. And then I would do the same thing with this one. See how this is an object? It's a text object, but I'm going to leave it in node. I'm going to leave the node tool selected so that you can see what happens. It goes from text to, if you go object to path, and now it's a path. Now what that means is I can add these two paths together by selecting both of them and then coming up here to path union, and now this is all one path. It still looks the same, but it's all one item. It's all one thing. So now when I put a gradient on this, if I add a linear gradient to it, notice I only have the one. I only have the one stop. Well, 2 of them if you count the transparent one. But this way, you can create. If I wanted to take this to there and make this gray, and then make this a little darker gray, you get the idea here. So now we've made color. We've made a color gradient that falls across both items that look like separate items, but it's treating them as one thing. So that's just a fine nuance, just some minor detail, but it allows you to add some creativity to your, and because this is a path right now, I could add a stroke to this if I wanted to, just by going, selecting the object. Let's put a bright yellow stroke on it. I'm going to hold down shift and hit the yellow key, or the yellow swatch, and notice what it did. It put a yellow stroke around the outside. And so now that creates a border. And I didn't think I was going to get into this, but this video is long enough now. It's 40 minutes long, and I might as well just add it to the video because it's not going to take that long. So let's increase the width of that stroke. Let's make it something that we can see. I'm going to take it up to 3, or let's go 4. So now we have 4, and I'm going to change the fill on this. Let's go back to the fill color, and instead of gray, let's make this let's just pump the saturation up to, let's make it a round number that I can remember, 60, and we'll set this one to 60. So now we have, a yellow stroke on a red, well, it's a gradient actually. It's a 2-color gradient of red. And let's say we want to make the stroke paint a gradient. You can do it. We just did it right there. So now we have a gradient on the stroke. Now let's say we want the exact same. Let's put the lightness on this one to 60, and this one will make 20. Actually, that's too dark. Let's make it 20. Let's make it 30. And then so now we got 60 and 30 and 60 and 60 for the color stops on the, or how'd that get to 64? Did I not lock it in? Oh, I didn't move away from it. Alright, so we have 60 and 60, and we have 59 and 30. It seems to like going to 59. But that's the 2 colors for the fill. Let's make the stroke paint. Let's make it the same. We'll take it, we'll go red, and we'll go 60 and 60. And then we'll make this one 0, 60, and 30. And we'll rotate that way, and we'll flip it. And now it's kind of tough to see because there's not a lot of contrast, but what we've just done is we've created a border around our text, and because of the stroke style here, we've got caps on. We can turn these corners so that they're rounded here instead of jointed or angled. Angled joints, you can make them exactly square. But the idea here is that this is a gradient that's on a stroke. And if you wanted to turn the brightness down, you can. I probably should have picked better colors to demonstrate that, but you get the idea. Your stroke paint, on this object, you have a stroke paint that's set to a gradient, and maybe that's why. Maybe, yeah, that's a lot better actually. So now you can see it a lot better. So it gives it some depth. It also gives it a border that complements the the color of the text. So that's just an example of one way that you can add some depth to text using gradients. And all I did was use the exact same colors but reverse them on the stroke. I reversed them, made them exactly opposite of what was on the fill. So you can do that with gradients. I think that's gonna do it. I think I like this better on 3. 4 is a little too, but you get the idea here. So what we did there was we started with text, made nice looking text, and then we converted it to shapes, and then we put a stroke on the outside of that shape, and then we put a gradient on the stroke. So you can put gradients not only on fills but also on strokes. And it works the same way on the stroke as it does if I choose the stroke paint up here and then I come down here and I select that gradient. Now you'll see that I have the gradient defined for both the stroke, which is here, this one, but I've also got a gradient defined for the fill. So if I wanted to, I could make this stroke. I could change the angle of the stroke gradient, and if I flip that, and then maybe if I go to the fill and I flip that, and then take a look at it, you get the idea. So now it looks like you're going from light to dark on the stroke down and to the right, but your fill color has a gradient going from top to bottom, dark to light. So you can just tinker with it, but that's how you can work with gradients. Hopefully I gave you some information that will help you to define your workflow, because that's really what a lot of times you'll watch videos and people will show you how they normally work, and I try to do that as well, but I realize that not everybody thinks the same. They don't prefer the same workflow. So what I'm trying to show you here is how the tool works and the different ways that you can use it. And then when you go to create your artwork, you can get a feel for how you like to work. Do you like putting the object on the canvas and then setting all the definitions and then fine-tuning it? Or do you like to just interact with the object using your mouse and some of the shortcut keys? You can do it either way, and by being able to select the gradient after you've put it on an object really allows you to interact with it. That's the takeaway from this video, is that you can apply the gradient using this panel up here, and you can change some of the settings. But if you want to interact with it directly, you just click the gradient tool here, and that allows you to move these color stops, and you can move them around. You can add color stops like we showed in the video just by double clicking on this and then moving things around in an interactive way. So that is some things that you can do with the gradient tool. That's going to bring this video to a close. Just a reminder, I do not have a membership, I don't have a Patreon, and I'm not sponsored. I just create these videos to help other people who are interested in learning the things I was interested in learning back when I first started getting into design and wanted to learn it at my own speed and didn't want to dump a bunch of money into learning how to work with it. So if you'd like to support the channel, feel free to check out my designs on the marketplaces listed in the links below. If you want to go the free route, feel free to support the channel by liking, subscribing, or just leaving a comment helps as well. That helps other people find the information that they're looking for, and it helps the channel get found by the right people. So I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.